What? I didn't even know this was a thing. Like I've been really effective at not paying attention to whatever the fuck is going on. Like
Well, let's get into
amazingly
what's going on.
effective at it.
Let's get into what's going on. Hello, everyone. This is episode 82 of the Three Body Problem. Can you believe we got to 8 through 82 of these things?
No.
We have Costin checking in from Davos, talking about the peace board. I think you went there to represent Romania on the peace board. What's going on in Europe, my friend?
I don't know what's going on in Europe. Like too many things. If you ask me, it feels like things are out of control. I saw Chancellor of Germany is complaining that there's too much bureaucracy in Germany.
Wow.
That he can fix, but he doesn't. That they abandon nuclear power. Like everyone is complaining about things in Europe.
Is Davos a big story there in Romania?
It is. To be honest, I watched some of the interviews. I watched like Elon Musk, I think, Trump, obviously, the Prime Minister of Canada, like the usual ones, the big names.
Yeah, the big talks. Yeah, those were the ones that made big news here as well. I didn't see any big sort of cyber component. I was looking around to see if there was going to be any talk around some geopolitical things about AI and chips. I saw China just approve the purchase. China's government approved the purchase, Tencent and these guys purchasing each 200 chips. I expected some of that there. Maybe it happened and we just didn't see the reporting. I didn't follow it too closely. But let's jump into the news this week. Last week, we talked about this checkpoint research into VoidLink. You remember this thing that you guys, for Linux, that you guys kind of suggested might have been like the Linux version of Shadowpad. We got a follow-up research note from Checkpoint saying that they believe the AI-generated malware has begun and that VoidLink stands as the first evidently documented case of this era as a truly advanced malware framework authored almost entirely by artificial intelligence. It's a mouthful. The language is kind of weird here. You guys, Costin, did you read this follow-up? Juanita, did you guys get a look at this follow-up? And are we in line with this being like fully AI-generated? Like, what are they talking about?
I mean, I looked at that. I was also like fortunate enough to be able to look at some other related components, and it is absolutely. It looks like it's been AI generated because the AI left some comments in there that the AI typically does in Markdown files. It is very professional. It's a very mature framework. If you ask me, it has like all the features that you would expect from one of these modern frameworks that are supposed to replace Shadowpad or Cobalt Strike. Very mature, very serious, well written, leveraging multiple programming languages for different parts of the framework. This is I think the only question that remains is how long and how many resources it took and how much it costed. Because if you do one of these with something like $50, and if you can do a new one every week, then we are like in big trouble. We're fucked. But if it costed like $100,000, then we're safe.
Well, can you just dig a little deeper? How do we know for sure that it was AI generated model?
I would say that there are signs and indications again in the comments in the Markdown files, which kind of suggest they were coded by AIs.
Well, the Checkpoint folks kind of answered some of our questions from last time, right? Because before we were like, oh, how do they know? Like you kind of have the panel and stuff, so like it was obvious that they had more access than just like, oh, we ran into these samples in an IR or we ran into these samples on VT. And then on this follow-up, what they mention is that it was like an open directory and that it included these helper files that are generated by something called TRAE, which is some kind of, AI engineering platform. So based on that, they're talking about it being AI generated. And like, I came into it very skeptical because I'm like, oh, well, how the fuck do you know that it was AI generated, right? Like if we're just going to talk about coding conventions, you're like, meh, it feels soft. It doesn't, it's not quite right. But they have all the right pieces to say, okay, well, clearly when you have like a test-driven design spec from a known AI engineering platform in Chinese with all the requirements, I think it's pretty much the game's up, right? Like you've basically figured out exactly what it is. And I like Costin's point about, we don't know how much effort or cost it really took. What I will say is, considering some of the other stories we've got today and the Sean Heelan thing, I doubt it was a whole lot. Having done some of these, like I was been using Pedro Mamini's Maestro AI this past week, and I've been testing out Google's Conductor CLI thing. The costs are not high. The time investment isn't even that high, and you can get some functional things. So I doubt that this is a matter of like, oh, they had to spend hundreds of thousands. This is probably, at most, if they really, really did like a good job and they were thorough and everything, a couple $100 on API, assuming that you're paying for it yourself.
For this entire framework?
Possibly.
Costin, you believe those numbers? I mean, that sounds ridiculous. I mean, you're saying that like, if Juanito's numbers are right, we're fucked. And does that sound believable in the hundreds of dollars?
I mean, sadly, yes, because I know how easy and how cheap it is to develop things with AI nowadays. And I've been doing development myself, obviously not offensive research, but more like on the defensive side, and things that maybe I would have paid thousands of euros for other people to write them for me. Now you can do them with $10. So it's entirely possible that the development cost of this was in the range of $100, $200, maybe something like that. And the problem is that if you can push one of these every week, and if you can especially recycle the implant side of things, like the CNC backend can stay the same, but if every week you can build a new implant in a new programming language, including languages that nobody's ever cared about or heard of, then we have a big problem. It will become more and more difficult to cache them. It will become more difficult to link them together and to attribute them. It will be more difficult to keep track with all these new things that will be flooding us.
Everything about this is a tempo issue, right? Like that's at the end of the day, I think original discussions about what AI was going to do have been about just increased sophistication of capabilities. And that is a factor, but it's not the fact that like we're reaching sophistication, like extreme sophistication that is suddenly being added to the picture. It's that we are just casually increasing the sophistication, let's say from low to medium, but the amount of it is like stratospheric. Right, like now, if everybody who before would have had to rely on like a couple of shitty builders and a couple of like random, shitty generated pieces of code and some stuff stolen from Stack Overflow and some cobbled together whatever, which we would have said is like a low sophistication thing. It kind of works, but it's not good, or it's like very common. Now all of those people can go custom spec medium sophistication, let's say. But they can do, as Costin was saying, a different one every week for $100. That's the kind of thing that we're going to have to start worrying about, which is op tempo, development tempo, just going through the fucking roof.
But there's a good thing here, and I think there's a positive side to any kind of development, which is that they're going to solve the naming problem. Because if you can't attribute things anymore, then each one will get like a new name, I don't know, random XXXX. And the naming problem is solved. No more names.
We solved the most important problem in security, the naming problem.
Did Checkpoint mention OPSEC failures by the VoidLink developer exposed development artifacts? Is that the comments alone, Costin, or were there some other OPSEC failures they mentioned?
I don't know exactly which OPSEC failure allowed them to understand such a big picture of what's going on here. So there might have been something like an open folder.
I can think of two. Like, first off, a fucking open directory is like OPSEC failure number. Like, it's not just OPSEC failure number 1, but it's like a rite of passage, I think, for every threat actor at some point. Like, sometimes I know that that's a euphemism, but people who don't want to say, oh, we popped the server because it was easy to pop. They'll say, oh, it was an open directory. But a lot of the time it is an open directory. Like, people do this. People do this all the time, and more so nowadays that we're talking about everybody just kind of relying on AI to set things up. Like, the same way that we're shitting on vibe coders for using Vercel, like v0 Vercel or Replit or whatever to set up something, and then there's no security to the database, there's using outdated components, like whatever. The same shit is going to happen with threat actors that are overly reliant on AI to set some of their stuff up. So maybe we'll at least have the comfort of saying, well, they're very likely to just be rife with OPSEC failures for the more AI reliant folks.
Do we know?
The other thing here is typically when you encountered advanced frameworks in the past, not necessarily super advanced, but let's say complex frameworks with multiple plugins, you automatically assume that the people behind it are also sophisticated. Nowadays, you can get one of these frameworks like VoidLink, and in reality, the people behind it, they do childish mistakes or leave open folders, use super weak passwords, but at the same time, they leverage super sophisticated frameworks.
That was going to be my next question. Last week, we kind of surmised that. I asked the question, is this automatically APT? Is it automatically professional groups? We don't know that for sure now. I mean, you guys, last week, you guys told me, had all the hallmarks of would be, it looks like the next Shadowpad, definitely APT. Today, we were saying, not so fast.
I think we said definitely commercial. We didn't say definitely APT.
Right. I think you did mention PSOA.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Last week, US was going to acquire Greenland. This week, it doesn't. So things are changing from one week to another everywhere.
Did we have any clue where the public models were used, where the private models were used? What was actually used to do this creation?
I mean,
Did Checkpoint say anything?
I've never used, I don't think Checkpoint set the model, but they did point us to TRAE, and I've never used TRAE before. I found out about it.
What is TRAE for the rest of us?
It's some kind of AI engineering suite. And frankly, there's a lot of these days. So, if the results of this, if this platform is that good, then I'm going to go look at TRAE as like a good AI engineering solution. But there's a lot of AI engineering solutions. Most of the time, they rely on just the same, state-of-the-art frontier models. You'll use something, they end up acting as some kind of router themselves, right? Like they're kind of reselling you tokens is what happens with most of these products. But I mean, look, the proof is in the pudding, right? If the tool itself is good, then it suggests that the development mechanism is good. And even when they talk about like this spec-driven development and test-driven development, like those sorts of paradigms used to be just like the kind of mothballed software engineering speak that was just relevant to software engineers and probably just relevant to I'm not going to say students, but people who work at places that have very anal style guides and like specific ways of doing things. They were usually not discussed, and you seldom heard about it from people who were just trying to become programmers. Now they're really important because experienced vibe coders, people like Brandon Levine, will tell you like the quality of what you can get is drastically better if you essentially walk these AI development tools through that process. You get them to develop a PRD, a product requirements doc. You get them to develop a functional spec doc. You get them to do some stub code. You get them to do, either you do test-driven design or, whatever it is. Essentially, you create a mental framework for the AI to not just run off and code a bunch of shit and it's like half of it is broken and half of it is whatever. You basically make it so it goes, okay, you're supposed to break this task down into these features. For each feature, you need a Git work tree. For each one of those, you need to have a testing suite. Before you tell me that the feature is done, you need to have tested, it needs to have passed, I need to have verified, and then you Git committed. Like you basically teach it to not be like a naive programmer and rather to act like a software engineer, and lo and behold, the results that you get out of it are better, the same way that when you teach a human being to do that, the results are better.
Can we rule out that this is some university project? No?
I mean,
yes,
you
no?
never know.
Okay.
But at this,
You know what? You
things
know
are
why I'm
happening in
asking the question.
universities.
Yeah.
I tell you why things are happening. In some universities, including where I studied, there were lab assignments where they asked you to design viruses. So, like one of the labs, they asked me to develop a boot virus. So it's entirely possible, but at the same time, it does look like someone paid for this try thingy, which is developed by the TikTok guys, by ByteDance. So you can plug in different models in it, like Claude, like Kimi, and so on. So I think because of that, maybe it's not necessarily an university project. Students are poor. I don't know.
We just had
Students are poor.
this. Yeah, we just had this. Do you remember this thing with the logo fail popping up in a piece of malware, and we found out it was a South Korean university project. So I'm just curious if, like, a lot of this stuff that you're talking about,
But
could
that was
possibly
very
be
theoretical. That was a highly theoretical project, the BootKitty. While this one looks like ready to use plug and play malware framework, which you can deploy and you can use it, and it seems pretty capable. And something like this, I would say that, there were companies selling things like this for 100,000, for 200, for $500,000 in the past, depending on where and when. So, like, if you would just do this for the university, then probably you're missing on big payments.
And the other question that came up in my mind here is, if they had used Claude, Anthropic, OpenAI, we have enough guardrails there that would have blocked this, and they would have published a report saying that they found Chinese people using their platform, right?
Absolutely not.
Because that's what we hear. We get these threat intel reports from OpenAI with 4 or 5 case studies of XYZ was using OpenAI to do malware scripting, to do this, to do that. Anthropic says when Anthropic found APT using their thing, they made a point to say, hey, but our guardrails were strong. I mean, they strained it. If this had been done on OpenAI or Anthropic public models, would they have blocked it?
Wait. This was definitely, almost certainly done using those models. Like, they're being rerouted. I think it's important to kind of draw a distinction between assistive and autonomous operations. This is what I would call an assistive use of AI when it comes to security, which is you go to a platform and you go, I'm trying to build a piece of, malware or whatever. Obviously, you're not going to describe it that way. And it assists you in setting this thing up and creating it, and largely autonomously puts it together, and then you test it and you go back and forth and whatnot. What was more interesting about this Anthropic report before is they were talking about an autonomous operation. The idea being, this thing is out there. It's just running the whole op for you. It's going. It's running the commands, deciding what to do, taking information in, and moving forward with it. And those two things, it's important to distinguish. At the same time, being realistic and frankly, like, look, we can think through this. We don't need to be AI experts to think about this, right? How do you create a tool that is meant to help people with general purpose tasks, particularly general purpose coding and computing tasks, and at the same time produce effective guardrails to keep that tool from generating things that can be used maliciously, or things that can produce unwanted, quote unquote, unwanted results, considering that, like, there isn't a difference in the, like, physical matter of what you're building, right? Like, there's a reason that living off the land works so well and is so problematic. All those tools are administrative tools. They're all native tools. They're all things that you would use for legitimate purposes that just so happen to expose the same functionality of what you need to conduct a malware attack. So it's been among us. We've been dealing with this whole, I think I did a presentation at CanSec West like 2014 or 15 with Fabio Assolini We called it wolf in sheep's clothing. And we were just talking to, like, this was before living off the land had like a name and a term. And we were just saying, hey, look at all the ways in which people are using, native interpreters, Python, Ruby on Mac OS, like things that are just there. Obviously PowerShell was becoming a thing. The issue you're going to have in computing is just everything is dual use. There isn't a clear sense of intentionality. Nothing is sort of, few things are easily determined for their intention as being good or bad. Few things are exclusively good or bad. And even if you want to go hardcore on guardrails, all you have to do is tell this thing a plausible story, right? No, I'm not cyber stalking somebody. I'm running a sanctioned OSINT check for like executive protection, and I need you to go look for this, that, and the other. No, I'm not creating a piece of malware to.
And there's no guardrail for that. That kind of prompt injection will be there forever.
Just think about
right?
it. Just think about it. What does it mean to have a guardrail? Because there is a legitimate use case that you want to be useful for. So, like, essentially, what's the guardrail for an employee lying to you? There isn't one, right? Like, that's human, that's duplicity, that's human, and that's the ambiguity of human intentions. And like that is it's a philosophical problem that I think we are kind of very quickly skipping over. That they're just when we talk about autonomous actions, we may be able to have a slightly more nuanced discussion of what is good and bad and what an LLM should be comfortable doing or not doing. When it comes to assistive actions of just like coding and development and tool creating and so on, I do not see how you can guardrail against those things without essentially neutering the whole value of the product, which is to be able to code things and build things for you.
So when OpenAI and Anthropic boasts about these guardrails blocking people from doing these dual use, the negative side of dual use things, we should ignore them. I mean, the reality is that they really don't have. That's what you're saying.
I think that we shouldn't ignore them, but I don't think the conversation is being had quite as explicitly and realistically as it should be right now, because it's very deflating, right? Like I think the reality of guardrails right now is it's not pretty, it's not easy, it's not effective. It's better than not having them in theory, because when you look at like open source models, the toothpaste is out of the fucking tube, right? There is no guardrailing these things. So at that point, what we're discussing is, well, how effective are these models? And a lot of the solace that we take is to say, well, the open source models, they're good, but they're not as good as Opus 4.5. They're not as good as GPT 5.2, right? Like there's a distance, a gap between like the state of the art and what's readily available that's unverifiable and not supervisable. So you do want some distinction there. You do want some guardrails, but I don't think we're discussing just how it's not even ineffective, but essentially self-defeating overactive guardrailing can be. And there is a discussion to be had as to whether like it's even desirable.
Yeah, we had this discussion when Grok was making bikini images of women a couple of weeks ago, and Costin made it very clear that people do that stuff. The technology isn't really doing that stuff, and then we get into that conversation. I want to pivot just on this dual use, and the dual use issue is you previewed it, Sean Heelan's latest essay on the coming industrialization of exploit generation with LLMs. Sean Heelan, who you've talked about on the podcast, I mean, last your year-end recap, Juanito, was basically guiding people to Sean Heelan's thoughts. In this one, he's arguing that the industry needs to prepare for this industrialization of offensive cyber work. Set it up for me, and before you go there, for the audience, who is Sean Heelan?
So Sean Heelan is a brilliant vulnerability researcher. Frankly, he was on my radar just as Halvar's co-founder at Optimize and some previous projects, and that just speaks to kind of how much newer I am in the sort of vulnerability research space. Brilliant dude, and he has been putting out this amazing these like amazing pieces about his use of LLMs when it comes to vulnerability research and discovery that have stuck with me, right? Like that's why everybody knows, like I won't shut the fuck up about like Sean Heelan's previous piece on O3. And then, you know, once this came out, I saw your comments, Ryan. Ryan's like posting like, oh man, here come like another 10 years of like Jags ranting about Sean Heelan. But I am, I not only stand his work, but I think his approach is the kind of approach that I'm hoping more people will adopt. Because when you read one of these posts, it's not just like, look, this is what I'm able to do, and this is what it implies about what's going to happen in the space. It's also, and here's my GitHub with the source code and the harness and the results and how I did the context engineering and what worked and what didn't work, right? Like it's a very repeatable, you know, scientific methody perspective on experimental use of LLMs for vuln research, and I think it's fucking great. What's cool about what Sean's doing, right? He essentially goes through these experiments, essentially trying to get the state of the art models, right? Your Opus 4.5 or GPT 5.2, to find vulnerabilities like to some autonomous degree. And what he's telling us is they're doing well. Like they're doing well at finding vulnerabilities and weaponizing some of these things. Is it the most complex vulns? Not necessarily, but it's not like they're super simple either. And
is it finding vulns that it's been trained on?
It's finding vulns. It's
From
finding
data that
zero days. It's not necessarily finding entirely new classes of vulns. It's not creative per se. So you could say, well, this is very similar to a vulnerability that we've already, yeah, okay, sure. But it's a vulnerability in the source code of the latest version of this project, and it can be weaponized to do some semblance of like particular objectives, right? Spawn a shell, write a file, connect back to a thing. So we can split hairs about whether it's a vulnerability that you respect, but it is a vulnerability that is in the latest version of this component and is not patched or protected against. So, right, like it is there.
Costin, did you take a look at this? Because this comes back to our pricing thing and cost issue, right? Because the big takeaway here from Sean is that he's putting certain caps on it and certain times on these challenges to go write exploits and put certain caps. And I think he cites what, $30 for Opus 4.5 are the limits that he set, and $50 direct cost on ChatGPT 5.2, which like Juan said earlier, these are just negligible costs. What is your big takeaway?
This is one of the reasons why I was exactly saying in our previous discussion about VoidLink that if this costs like in the range of $100, then we are in like big trouble. And I was thinking exactly of this $30 and $50 that Sean talks about in his research. The other thing I was thinking here is that perhaps these are cheap because this vulnerability like QuickJS, maybe it's kind of easier for LLMs to discover as opposed to maybe having to reverse engineer some kind of binary code, so kind of blind discovery of vulnerabilities. And obviously, it's easier as it gets access to the source code if you want. And I was thinking that nevertheless, it is kind of a moment where it's becoming feasible to do mass discovery of vulnerabilities, and this is definitely going to change the economy. Now, I was also curious what difference would it make if you used also things like Google Gemini, like Grok, that might be even, let's say, more powerful, more effective because of maybe less guardrails, whatever. And that would be, of course, interesting to know. But at the same time, this makes it pretty obvious for everyone who's been kind of ignoring the trend that discovery of vulnerabilities with LLMs is here to stay, and it's very cheap. It's getting cheaper and cheaper. And in time, they will be able to attack more sophisticated surfaces that don't necessarily include just JavaScript, like JavaScript rendering engines, but more sophisticated, like maybe I don't know, image rendering libraries like JPEG, like a GIF or PNG or other file formats or audio formats and so on, which will have the potential to produce much more dangerous and like bugs that have real world potential impact, something that can be used in the wild, something that, I don't know, anyone can integrate in their exploitation kit to deploy on a waterhole. And of course, it's one thing if nation states deploy this in a targeted manner. It's a different thing if some cybercriminal group comes, they develop a new 0-day every week for $50, and then they deploy it on 1,000 websites they hack. It doesn't matter that it gets burned, because in the past the problem was nobody wants to burn their 0 days on massive waterhole attacks. That's why they use 1 days, N days, whatever. But if you can have a new one every week, then I think this suddenly is part of the discussion, and I think that's a real danger, that we are massively producing potentially exploitable bugs at a scale never seen before, which can deploy implants that are a new one every week, a new kind of an implant. That is going to have a significant impact on the ecosystem.
Is that hyperbole, Juan? I mean, that sounds like hype and hyperbole to me. Oh,
No,
we're going to have
it's-
all these AI agents doing all these things, and it's going to be cheap, and anyone can, write a framework today, and everyone can get ODAs tomorrow, and it's just a free-for-all. It's costing $50. This is madness to me.
It's not hyperbole in the slightest. I think it's important to keep things within understandable parameters, but there have been people that have been signaling these things to us for a while now. So, particularly on the bug finding and bug discovery thing, right?
People who got shit to sell.
No,
Okay, never mind. Never mind. Go ahead.
Fuck that, dude.
No.
Absolutely
I'm
not.
exposed. I'm exposed to the VC ecosystem of
You
people who are
are, and
hyping
that's-
this shit beyond. So this is why I'm coming in with like maybe an overly skeptical mind. But go
Look,
ahead.
hype shit is there, and it's awful, right? And I've told you this before. Like I have been I was in a State Department delegation in Costa Rica, where a Scale AI dude said that their AI was producing 0 days, like it could produce a 0 day and whatever. And like this was like years ago, 3 years ago, whatever, 2 years ago, and that was bullshit. That was a complete fucking lie. It was a complete lie. And a lot of the VC stuff is still a complete fucking lie. It's aspirational. It's I don't know that white lie is not an appropriate way to sell this. There's some kind of like, gold-plated lie, which is just like, we think we're going to get there and we're just kind of giving you like the vision. But
How does the audience sift through VC bright lights, white lies in the sky versus what are white lies? Like
Well,
this is the issue the rest of us have.
It just doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what somebody's claiming for the sake of selling you something. It's what matters is what the things are actually capable of. And the problem with getting too allergic to hype is that it's easy to then ignore what is not hype and what is somebody telling you what the capabilities are. And what I was going to point to was actually Perry Adams and AIXCC. Like people like Dave and Perry, like Dave Vitale, Perry Adams, and so on, have been telling us this is coming. Vulnerability discovery through some level of like greater automation is coming. And they were not just right, but in hindsight, it's sort of obvious, because this is an area where you have the right components in place. You have access to, a lot of the time you're going to have access to the source code, right? Like Costin made an important distinction between like what is black box vulnerability discovery, having to reverse engineer something and actually look for a bug, versus having the source code in front of you. So open source versus closed source does make a difference here. Does it make the ultimate difference? Not necessarily, but it does make a difference. And then more importantly, you have a clear objective or set of objectives that make it so that you know what acceptable results are, and you're able to some degree to reproduce an environment where you can have verifiers that are automated verification that a result has been produced. So when you put those conditions in place, this is like the perfect hard, like creating 0 days and finding vulnerabilities and exploitable bugs is, it's kind of like the perfect recipe for what you can instrument LLMs to do in like a semi brute force approach, right? You can essentially just do this, like Sean was saying in his previous post, 100 times, and look, it popped up 3 times with like something good. And what he's saying is it's getting better, it's getting cheaper, it's more reliable that these things are going to find results. And what I think is more important for us as an industry is not to sit around deciding whether these claims are true or not. That doesn't matter. You already have a bunch of people whose fucking life goal right now is to make it true. So what we need to do as defenders is just act as if it is true. The same way we've always been saying, right? Assume compromise, right? Like you act as if it's true, and then you go looking for what the thing is that like that proves you right or wrong. With these things, I think we need to act as if it's true and start to have conversations about what cybersecurity is going to have to look like in a world where finding 0 days, finding unknown vulnerabilities is not a capability that is only available to the cream of the crop, highest top 1%, 5%, 10% of threat actors, but rather there are certain classes of bugs for certain types of software ecosystems that are now readily, like the capability to find weaponizable vulnerabilities is readily available to most threat actors with $200 in their pocket. So we are no longer able to have the same threat actor stratification that we used to do, where we would just say sophisticate, like developing your own exploits immediately pushes you to like a level of sophistication that is greater than, you know, the majority of threat actors. Right? Like, think about how we've been talking about the North Koreans this whole time. Like, in this podcast, we've had this giant about face where, like, Costin has proven how, like, naive I am in looking at the North Koreans, or how naive I was in looking at the North Koreans and saying, oh, well, but these guys don't have this capability. They're not that good at doing X, Y, and Z. They're still kind of, you know, Bush League. And Costin taught me, no, that was true when we worked on this shit many years ago. Now they're coming up with novel exploits for, you know, these like shitcoin compilers and like Solidity contracts, and they're doing all this interesting shit. Clearly their capabilities have risen. And we need to, like, the same way that I learned that and I ate crow on the podcast and I hopefully became a slightly better person, but only marginally in that process, we now need to do that for most threat actors. Because now what you're going to say is, if the difference between the haves and have-nots is not finding geniuses and having them develop capabilities for specific code bases, specific programming languages, specific attack types, but rather, can they get their hands on $150 worth of API credits for OpenAI or Anthropic, and they can also finagle their way to using somebody else's API keys or stolen credit cards, then we need to reshift the fucking threat actor pyramid now. And we need to start having conversations about what defense looks like in a world where a 0 day is not a, oh, what an amazing, unfortunate, unforeseeable, catastrophic, but statistically improbable thing has just befallen us, but rather something that's going to happen every Tuesday and Thursday.
Costin, that still sounds like a lot of hyperbole to me. I can't get over my skepticism that it's going to come down to $50. I mean, I get what you're trying to say.
It's documented. It's there. It's in front of you. There's a paper. And there's source code. There's examples. Like, it's there. We're there.
Meanwhile, the folks from Node.js, due to an overabundance of AI slop reports and vulnerability reports, have now shifted to making sure people have like a HackerOne reputation signal metric before they can submit bugs. The Node.js security team experienced a significant increase in low quality reports. Trend has been increasing over the years. Alongside that, the folks at the Coral project basically says our current policy is we instantly ban all reporters submitting AI slop. So what part of what we're talking about and part of this future of like everything being easily available is AI slop generating nonsense and bombing these open source projects. Like what is real and what isn't real? That's where my head is at with this with the hyperbole and the hype.
It's all real. It's all real. All of this stuff is happening, including the AI slop bug reports. And I would point, I'll point to two, maybe three different but important things in this whole AI slop bug situation, which is I think we're seeing the difference between AI and AI. Not all AI is created the same. And this is something that a lot of people are suffering with, particularly when it comes to like corporate approved deployments of AI and like what does your company, what AI is your company getting shoved down their throats because they're already a customer of Microsoft. They're already a customer of whatever, right? So like I truly feel for anybody who's forced to use Copilot as any kind of AI anywhere. It's a piece of shit. The same way that Siri's been a piece of shit. And like you just have to call things what they are.
Satya asked you not to call it slop.
Satya can suck it. Copilot is garbage, and I think Satya knows it too. It's just that Satya's not going to leave $1 on the table, period. The same way that like, Google has been pushing their AI offerings onto all, like everything, G Suite, YouTube subscriptions, whatever the fuck you want. However, Google has DeepMind and they have a real frontier lab that's building cool shit. So what you get sometimes is very good. But I say sometimes for a good reason. There are models that are doing amazing shit. Sean Heelan is playing with Opus 4.5 and GPT 5.2. These are the state-of-the-art models that you have out there. They're hardcore. They do amazing shit. If Sean Heelan went and did this with GPT-4 or Sonnet 3, whatever, the results would be very different. And I think part of the problem here is there's a lot of people who have access to all kinds of AI, but the Google AI search mode is a piece of shit because it's a low quality model. Copilot is a piece of shit because it's a low quality, cheap inference model. And this is, it's not that I wanted to run off on a tangent, but I think this is a factor when you look at these AI slop reports. It's a lot of the same random dudes that used to go around submitting garbage bug reports of like, oh, I found like a stupid like XSS vulnerability here because I don't understand how websites work. Right now, those people are on steroids doing this shit, and they're doing it with Copilot or like, what did they say? Bard AI, which is like a super old like Google product. So like, of course you're getting slop. The other thing I want to point to is that the problem here is a matter of verifiability. For a long time, we've been saying verifying bug reports is a costly manual human endeavor. And what you're seeing is not people getting pissed off because they're getting a lot of AI slop reports that are not real bugs, but rather that it's taking up a shit ton of people's time to figure out if they're real or not. So what we have is not a crisis of bad bug reporting. That's been a thing for a while. What we have is a crisis of our ability and throughput to verify things getting very quickly sort of taken down a few pegs. And it's what we discussed with the FFmpeg situation. So the parting shot I want to leave here is, well, it looks like maybe the bug bounty companies are going to have to start doing some work. Maybe they need to be the ones fucking verifying things instead of just being a messaging platform for people who you want to have under NDA so you can shut them the fuck up, but they can send you bug reports, and then all the bug companies do is grab those and just shovel them right back to the developers at the company that's supposed to be doing this. So what's your function? How about you guys become, testing environments and have actual like attempts at verifying some of these things so that you can filter some of them out before you give them to the developers, and then you can do that in some kind of open source pro bono thing for these programs, and then we can stop having this conversation, right?
That sound you hear is like 5 VCs funding companies to go do verification. Yeah, the big takeaway, the bigger issue here is that open source projects are ramping up these complaints against AI slop. Now, and it's not only that the verification side of things, it's how much time it takes away from you actually fixing real things. So the resource logjam there, we had this conversation with Big Sleep and Aardvark. I mean, Devitel even said we don't publicize and do things and to do naming and shaming because these guys are bombarded with this kind of shit.
Yeah.
So this AI slop is not going away. I am struggling to figure out what is slop. What is real? Do I need to wait for a Sean Heelan blog post to tell me? Like, you know what I mean? It just feels like we're in this noisy ecosystem, Costin. Wrap it up for me. Wrap up this whole industrialization of exploit generation. And
I think we're seeing multiple generations of different quality AI work. We're still seeing kind of the old generation that is becoming more easily recognizable. So every day, for instance, I get tons of marketing emails like AI slop, if you want to call them. Some of them even include the replies from the LLM where it says, "Hey, if you want, I can turn this into a newsletter that you can share with your subscribers."
It's really bad,
and it's in the newsletter. I got one like those every day. But at the same time, we're seeing the new generation, which are some of these messages and papers and research. They are almost indistinguishable from quality work done by some of the best people in the industry. So this matters a lot, like the quality matters a lot. And I think that we're seeing a phenomenon similar to maybe the industrialization of production in the 80s and 90s when things started to be built in China. And suddenly, it was nice to have a screwdriver, okay? But like this back in the 80s, people who had the screwdriver, they were like important people. But then screwdrivers made in China, they flooded the market and everybody had a screwdriver which was like so and so. But then like some people had German screwdrivers which are much better than everything else made in China, and those became extremely valuable, like I don't know, brand names, quality stuff. And I think that this is just shifting the attention towards the more quality produced information that will become more valuable in the future. And if everybody can make some kind of average malware, it will make those high-end quality frameworks and the high-end zero-click chains with persistence even more expensive, because the quality of the work will make a difference. And everyone will have access to Chinese screwdrivers, but only few will have the German ones.
I want to follow up on that analogy though, Costin, because what we see in the AI space is very similar to, I think, what you're describing with the screwdriver mechanism, which is the Chinese used to make shitty ones, so you appreciated the German ones, and then the Chinese figured out how to make cheap ones like the German ones, so then everyone could have high quality ones for cheap. And the same thing happens in the AI space right now, where you get open source model from China. Yeah, it's there, not that good, but you can get it for cheap. Then the Americans or the Brits right now will make a state-of-the-art model that does amazing shit. So of course, if you can use that, you're doing much better. And then the Chinese find some way to distill that capability or fine-tune some smaller model into being able to do something specific. And then everybody can do it for, good and cheap. So the analogy proves out, and we're still in it. And I think it's why I'm not unsympathetic to what you're experiencing, Ryan. I'm tired of the fucking hype too. Everything I read, I need to triple guess, and I don't trust anything anymore, and neither should anybody else. But that really shouldn't keep us from, like, if you're just throwing it all out, baby and bathwater, because of the amount of hype, we're missing the fact that some shit is already happening.
I'm saying I can't find a baby. I see a baby foot over there. I see a finger in the ocean over here, but I can't find a baby. It's so hard to find a baby.
No. You need to apply a homicide detective's mentality. If you found a baby there's a dead baby somewhere. A baby foot or a baby finger is enough to know that there's a dead baby.
I'm saying the bath water is too big, and there's just too much froth everywhere.
It's a distraction, dude.
Well, let me linger here for just a quick second. All the innovation on the defensive side is also around agentic AI doing automated all these tasks and doing all these defensive things for you. So now we have agent versus agent, and now it become a cost thing. I'm reading our friend Gabe on your team at Sentinel Labs. I don't know if you want to jump into this, but Gabe mentioning like even like the benchmarks, the analysis of the benchmarks for LLM insecurity, including those published by the majors, Microsoft, Meta, and so on. None of them measure up to what actually matters. So we like the hype cycle and the nonsense factor, the froth in the baby bath water is so overwhelming that I feel like we're all being played.
We are all being played on a variety of levels, and it's why people are freaking out about like economic allocation of investment when it comes to AI and all that kind of shit. But the conversation is confused at all levels, and it's why I'm not unsympathetic with your confusion in this. We're all confused. I am confused. Everyone is. We're even to some extent, it even feels like we're meant to be confused. But what Gabe is showing.
That we're doing an AI podcast again,
bro. It's so here. I'm gonna give you a line that I heard this week that I have not been able to stop thinking about, which is there is no cybersecurity without AI anymore. That's it. We need to redefine our industry in terms of AI because the attackers are redefining their industry and their practice in terms of AI. So whether you fucking like it or not, we are in the AI business now. So y'all motherfuckers better start adapting. I've been trying to get you guys there for the past 2 years. The keynotes were all about that. Shit is changing. It's shifting under our feet. We might not fucking like it, but it can be good for us. Adapt. Adapt, motherfuckers, adapt, because there is no cybersecurity without AI anymore. Now, what Gabe is pointing to with his piece, which is sort of the beginning of, I've been signaling, right, that Sentinel Labs is moving to be an AI applications towards security research team. And this year, we've kicked off with a bunch of, pieces and posts, and we're about to drop another one next week on, this kind of research that I think is meaningful. What Gabe is pointing to is the fact that right now, part of the problem, and part of what, Ryan, you're so frustrated with is the people selling the things are the people grading and evaluating their performance. And I don't think it takes a fucking genius or a conspiracy theorist to realize that that is not going to be something that produces good results, right? When you let the person selling you the thing evaluate the value of the thing, they are almost certainly going to tell you that their thing is great and that everybody else's things are not great and that you should buy the thing from them. There's not a lot of cyber benchmarks. There's not a lot of cyber evaluations right now. And it turns out that, when you go deep dive over them, so Adir and Gabe went through the big benchmarks that have been published so far, not only are they not really very comprehensive, they're almost certainly entirely self-serving, or they're completely abstracted away from the real work. So what you have is essentially
they use LLMs to evaluate other LLMs.
Well, I mean, and that's a part of it, and that's a standard part of how you do some of these evaluations. But what's worse is they use the same model LLM to evaluate the same model output, which
so
is like
this closed loop.
You get a closed loop where because look in AI research, having one model evaluate another model is actually really good practice. It does great things when they're different models. If it's the same fucking model, then it's just the same bias kind of reinforcing itself. But I think, look, there's a bigger point here. It's not that it's very simplistic. Connect the dots on these three topics we've just been talking about. Benchmarks and verification is more important now than the ability to produce a thing. We need to know whether the thing works, because we can now produce 100 things in the time that it takes any one of us to verify a single thing. So verification is actually more important than the ability to produce. Right now, on the defensive side, the standard for verification is garbage benchmarks that are self-serving or entirely do not capture the nature of our actual work. So therefore, when you realize that model development and improvement is based on benchmarks, the idea that models are going to get better at defensive shit the same way they're getting better at offensive shit it's not going to prove out, because there are no good benchmarks out there that meaningfully allow these people to iterate into making the models better for defense. So like, shit can be better for us, but right now it's not a raid to be better for us.
What does fixing it look like? What is the fix? Is there a perfect state? Is there a better state? What are we asking for?
The fix in this particular area in the near future is that we need to get very savvy with AI. We need to embrace it. We need to just accept that this is what these are the terms and these are the tools of our trade now. And more importantly, that we need to be the ones developing our benchmarks. We need to be the ones, the defensive industry, cybersecurity
defensive
industry.
Side of things, not rely on the majors to produce these benchmarks for us.
The majors are going to sell us the products. We need to evaluate independently what they do and how well they do it. And more importantly, people, as much as I love open, the same way we talk about IOCs, right? Like, we want samples, we want things to be shared. Share them amongst the industry. Do not make them public and open source in their content, because then you're feeding the pool of what they train the models on. No, dude, like, it's the same as standardized testing. If I give teachers the test with the answers, they're going to train students to be really good at taking that standardized test. They're not going to make the students good at doing the thing that would mean they're able to do well on the test. So it's a new paradigm, but if we don't evaluate our own shit, we're fucked, guys. Like, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between somebody selling you like garbage Copilot AI for fucking 3 cents a token versus like hella hardcore mega defense GPT-6 AI for 5 cents a token, and we're gonna be screwed.
Costin, wrap up this AI segment for me. Put a bow on all of this.
Look, Gabe says something very interesting in the blog. He says, like, in the part 2, we're gonna talk a bit more about how to evaluate models, how the next generation of testing will look like. So I think this is also very important, and I'll give you a personal story. A friend of mine wanted to lose some weight, and I was talking to him every now and then. He asking like, "Hey man, how are you doing?" And he was saying like, I'm so unhappy, I'm not losing weight, I'm dieting, exercising, running. And I was like, how much did you lose this month? He says, I don't know, because I'm not weighing myself. I don't want to look at the scale, because every time I look at the scale, I feel unhappy and depressed. And it's like, if you don't look at the scale, how do you know what's working and what's not? So it's very important. It's part of the process. If you want to lose weight, you need to weight yourself, look at the scale, see what the scale says. If you want to improve your models, if you want to improve your defenses, then you need to develop tests, and you need to be aware of what works and what doesn't, and focus on what works, develop what works.
Do we need an independent body to do this, or are we going to just be inundated by methodologies? Everyone has their own methodologies and metrics. Like, what is the end? Juanito, when I asked you about the end state of fixing this, Gabe is promising a part 2 with methodologies and so on.
Yeah.
What really fixes it? Do we need what is the call? Give me the name of the other independent agency.
I think right now we just need to all start doing it because we need to do it for ourselves. And that, sucks to hear. But I will also remind you folks how well we've done with independent bodies for testing things like AVs, right? Like, look at the AV testing industry. Look at MITRE and like all their bullshit, right? Like it's just... it's too soon for us to be looking to pawn this problem off on somebody else, especially when our experience with pawning the problem off on somebody else is that they find a way to make money off of it and hold everybody else for ransom.
This is the future.
And then we don't get anything. if this is our future, if we don't figure out a way to test, like we need to figure out a way to evaluate the value of what we're being sold as consumers. And you can't just pawn that off on somebody else. We need to work
But
on
everyone's
this.
going to game it anyway. I mean, everyone's going to game it until you get that independent, quote unquote, independent body to put some sort of semblance of.
I mean, look, it doesn't have to be
I have to call
everybody.
Gabe. I have to call
does-
Gabe for a better education on this.
It doesn't have to be everybody, but look, if Anthropic or OpenAI or Google DeepMind or XAI, whomever, come out with a model and they go, this is the ultimate blue team SOC model. You don't need anyone in your SOC anymore. We now have this shit, right? Sec Gemini, just plug it in and it's going to fucking kill it. And I don't know, 2 or 3 security vendors or startups or whatever come out and say, we ran our benchmarks and no, it fucking sucks. It doesn't do well. Or yes, it's actually really good if you're willing to spend $1,700 an hour running queries. Or, you know, it's okay, but it's assistive and like you still need 2 SOC people. Maybe you don't need 5. The minute you start getting those independent reports, not everybody has to do this. Now you have independent folks that you know that are serving as sort of verifiers, and that was the pseudoscientific method that we applied in threat intel back in the healthy Twitter days, right? When I would come out and say, "Oh, I found this thing," and I reverse whatever, and somebody would jump in and go, "Oh, you idiot, you missed this other thing," or actually you misreversed this thing. It's this other library, and you go, "Oh, thank you, great," and we would all check each other's work. That is the kind of thing we're going to have to develop. What that turns into cynically eventually, okay, like we can worry about that shit later, dude. But like right now, we have nothing. So we need to do something. Otherwise, we're just naive consumers.
Naive
Well,
consumers facing down $50 exploit.
Absolutely.
Go,
I love it.
One thing which you said, Juan, you were saying that people were not paying attention to your keynotes. But today I was looking at a blog post from Trend Micro on a waterhole attack. And I noticed one thing which I have not seen before. It said Trend AI trademark research. And like when did Trend Micro change their name to Trend AI? And then at the very end of the blog, they say more hunting queries are available for Trend AI Vision 1. So people are listening, like, and there is marketing happening on the AI side of
That
things.
wasn't my intention. I didn't say we needed to market
Sentinel
it better.
1 AI,
AI.
Labs.
Yeah, it's always been AI. It's always been AI.
I want to do a quick segment on CISA, our favorite agency. In all seriousness, CISA published an update this week on their Brickstorm advisory. Costin, quickly remind us who Brickstorm is and what did we get new in this CISA advisory? What's the update about?
Well, it's this malware family, a suite of tools used at least by what Mandiant calls ANC 5221. Which is a pretty sophisticated thing. They've been updating this advisory in December as well, and now there's a new update with more YARA rules. There's 2 additional YARA rules, which, by the way, are quite interesting. Like, unfortunately, in the past, we've kind of learned to expect very little from these YARA rules. And every time there's a new one, I do very extensive testing before using any of them in my systems. This time, like, the YARA rules are good. I would say they're okay. And there's one objection, like, of course, things can be better, but nevertheless, they're good. What I object about is that they have very strange names. So for some reason, people are putting all sorts of information into the namespace. Let me read it to you. It says rule CISA 25.1186_02. Colons Brickstorm space backdoor space installs other components space communicates with C2 space exfiltrates data. Like, why would you put all these things into the namespace? I don't understand. When you can better have it in the meta, and they do have something like capabilities equals installs or other components communicates with C2 exfiltrates data. Yeah, so that is a bit strange to me. What I was also noticing by looking at these YARA rules, which are, by the way, for Golang Brickstorm variants. Now, Golang Go-based malware are notoriously difficult to detect. It's super, super hard and tricky to write good YARA signatures for Golang malware because the strings are sorted, so it's difficult to sort them out like one from another. There are some tools like from Mandiant, for instance, like Floss, that can help with that. But nevertheless, these rules mostly use shellcode, so they use instructions for detection. And I was wondering what produces these rules, because I see that pretty much most of them are like this. And writing this kind of rules with maybe 6-7 strings and a condition like all of them, it's not easy at all. So I was like, I would be really curious to hear what produces them. Is it something like an engine? Is it something like ERGen using, I don't know, shellcode fragments? Is it something custom? Because they're like not your average YARA rules. Also, I'm not entirely like 100% sure that they're human produced. I mean, yes,
That was going to be
you
my
can make them.
question. Is it possible that
Sure.
this is not human produced? Because you were talking about Grok last week getting there. It was like a game-changing moment for you.
There's also a good moment to say that Florian Roth has a new version of Yargen that is written in Golang, by the way, so you can go play with that, and it has the ability to integrate with AI, so you can plug it with your OpenAI key and use some of that. So I was wondering, what produces these YARA rules that CISA just published, the one that they published in December. I somehow, it doesn't feel that they're human made. At least that's my opinion here. Perhaps they're produced by some kind of an engine, by maybe by some kind of a code similarity engine or solution. And also the naming. The naming reminds me of some previous CrowdStrike YARA rules. So I was wondering if someone who used to work at CrowdStrike suddenly got a job at CISA and
I remember you saying you can look at a YARA
those.
rule and tell who
Who
generally wrote it. Who wrote it, right?
There's things like, I'll just give you an example. People typically, when they look at the metadata section, they, for instance, don't care about the fine details. So, for instance, you recognize quality and you recognize people who are obsessed with the quality if the metadata section is sorted, like alphabetically. Why? Because people who are, let's say, they're very careful and order, they're going to sort the metadata section. They're going to do like author, date, description, hash, reference, revision, version, whatever, in alphabetical order. While other people, they won't care about it. So if we look at these CISA YARA rules, they're like randomly, the meta section is author, incident, date, last modified, actor equals not available. Family, capability, so they jump up and down. But then when you go to the strings, they are alphabetically sorted. So S0 begins with 31, then 44, then 41, 48, 48, 48, 81, E8. So maybe there's some kind of machine work kind of involved in generating these YARA rules. And if it is, it would be interesting to know what produces them. Because let's say the tools that are able to generate YARA rules and leverage shellcode and do it for Golang binaries, they would be quite rare.
You guys, TLP Black does YARA rule generation as well, right, for customers?
We do. We write YARA rules. We try to push one new YARA rule every day, every single day. It's very tough. It's very hard, and also we try to push relevant YARA rules. That is, rules for things that people don't know about, things that maybe we discover, or things that we know that for one reason or another are very sensitive, that they're very sought after samples, that maybe there's no publicly available samples anywhere for this thing, but we have a YARA rule for it, so we are hunting and hoping to get one at some point. So we do that, and we try to do that for Golang binaries, Rust binaries, which is a pain in the ass. We try to use, code similarity, all sorts of methods. and it's not easy, I can tell you.
Did we get samples for for Brickstorm? All the samples that is referenced in the advisory?
There's only one sample on VirusTotal out of all the hashes they mentioned in this blog. So I took the liberty to reply to their message on X and kindly ask if possible to share the other samples on VirusTotal. But if there's any chance they could upload them, that would be awesome. I think everyone in the community would have a Christmas kind of a day. So please make us happy and upload them.
Speaking of YARA rules and threat hunting, we have some zero-day magic this week, going back to one of our favorites, Fortinet. Fortinet, there's news. Shout out to the folks at Arctic Wolf. Arctic Wolf has a bulletin with IOCs and recommendations for what is a new wave of suspected OD attacks hitting FortiGate firewalls by malicious SSO logins. Catalin Chimpano, our friend and listener, mentions that it was a vulnerability that was improperly patched in December. Costin, can you wrap? What do we know about this Fortinet OD? Have you been following this one?
I have been following because it's relevant to one of the cases I've been working on. So this was particularly interesting as we were investigating certain compromises that involved Fortinet vulnerabilities. So if you remember the discussions from December, back then Arctic Wolf discovered that some of these customers, they were getting compromised. Fortinet didn't really know what was going on. Then they confirmed there's something. They delivered the patches. Now the news is that those patches, unfortunately, they don't fully address the situation. And a very important detail here, if you have FortiCloud SSO enabled, which is this FortiCloud single sign-on solution, if it is enabled in the router firmware interface, in the administration interface, then you can get compromised. If you don't have it enabled, then probably you're fine. So the first thing I can recommend, if you run Fortinet routers with the latest firmware, again, the latest and the greatest, if you have FortiCloud enabled, then there's a good chance you may have been already hit. There's indicators of compromise in the Arctic Wolf blog that you can look for in the logs, like certain email addresses that are used in the attack. And there's also artifacts like IP addresses. I looked a bit at the IP addresses that Arctic Wolf has in the blog. There's 4 of them. 2 of them are Cloudflare IP addresses. So I was wondering what's happening there. Is the attacker, they're using Cloudflare Warp VPN or something like that to scan the internet? Would be nice, by the way, to hear from Cloudflare how come those IP addresses are in the blog. And the
Do
other
we have
thing
information on victimology? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and there was another IP which I thought was interesting because it hit one of our honeypots. So there's an IP in Russia with the Russian ISP that hit one of our honeypots in December in Ukraine. That's one of the TLP black honeypots, and they were doing like something really strange on that honeypot. And I was wondering if they were actually scanning for something Fortinet related back in December. And what we're seeing now is the surgical attack of what they identified as potentially vulnerable. In terms of victimology, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily targeted. What Arctic Wolf seems to imply here is that it's automated and it's massive in the sense that it's hitting anyone on the internet who has a Fortinet router with SSO, FortiCloud SSO systems enabled.
Did they ship 2 separate CVEs? Did they issue a new CVE for the bypass as well?
So for the bypass of the patch, there's no CV as far as I can say. I suspect they're gonna just fill it under the same CVEs and just update the patch. So they're still gonna say it's CV 2025 59 718 and 719. But they're gonna just update their patch, which maybe was like an incomplete patch. Maybe they found a kind of workaround. I remember that in December we talked a bit about which of these CVEs could be used to compromise your routers, and it's always that some, you need to combine several of them in order to achieve a full chain. So maybe one of them solves a problem that the second one gets to leverage in order to dump, configuration. And once you have the router configuration, you can brute force hashes, and you can log in remotely. So typically it's a chain, and that chain can include multiple vulnerabilities, which is why some of these patches could be incomplete, because they patch them independently, but when taken together, you can still leverage a small opening here with another small opening here, and together they give you the chain.
Do we know if it's APT, ransomware, cybercrime?
So far we don't know who is behind this. I was trying to understand who might be behind it, and there's like the usual suspects, which would be Chinese APTs and Russian-speaking ransomware groups. Russian-speaking in the sense that they're like these conglomerates, which include the people in Moldova, Kazakhstan, Russia, maybe even Ukraine, some areas of Ukraine. So I guess those would be the top suspects, including the ones that were actually exploiting this back in December.
You're saying if they had SSO turned on, you should have maybe assumed compromise. What is the next follow-up step? So okay, what you patch and then what?
You can't patch because there's no patch. So you can't patch. What you can do is disable FortiCloud SSO.
That's it.
Sorry. Yeah, like that's what you can do. There's no
Should
patch
people
available.
Go back and reset credentials, like as a proactive measure, assuming compromise?
If a FortiCloud SSO was enabled, then you need to disable it, and I think you need to reset all the credentials. Make sure, if possible, make sure you have logs. One of the lessons that I keep telling people about is that eventually with this equipment, eventually, like be it Ivanti, Cisco, Fortinet, you name it, eventually you will get compromised. Why? Because you forget to install a patch, something happens and you get owned. And then what is even more important is that you have logs. If you don't have logs, you're blind. So make sure follow my advice here, like free advice, enable logs and store the logs for at least 2 years.
That's expensive though. It's expensive for everyone though, right?
I disagree. Depends on how you store the logs and where.
It depends on what you're calling logs.
True. I like the easiest, most stupid form of logs is syslog. So that is, in my opinion, pretty cheap to enable and to collect and store for a long period of time. It doesn't take a lot of hardware. I remember at some point, even like Microsoft and others, they were offering some cloud storage solutions for logs that were pretty affordable, in my opinion. So do store the logs. And then whenever you get compromised, at least you can look back at these logs. You can search them for indicators on compromise, and you can trace the path of the attackers, and you can understand what happened in there. Because if you don't have logs, and like I was saying, some of these solutions, they leverage some kind of a cloud, FortiCloud, to store the logs, which again, it costs money. Like owning, once you jump into this ecosystem, it costs money. For firmware updates, it costs money. For vulnerability warnings, for reporting, for storing the logs, everything costs money once you enter the ecosystem. So you need to understand that once you jump in there, you're going to have to pay money over and over.
This is just a tax. It's just
logs. It doesn't matter that you buy these things, which are still expensive, and then you get cheap on the logs. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. If you're going to jump into this ecosystem and pay tens of thousands of dollars for the routers and the hardware, then please buy the logs as well.
Along the same lines, we got a new bulletin from Cisco. Cisco P-Search saying they're aware of attempted exploitation of this vulnerability in the wild. CVSS 8.2 CVE 2026-20045. Vulnerability in Cisco Unified Communications Manager, Cisco Unified Communications Manager Session Management Edition, a bunch of other products listed here that could allow unauthenticated remote attackers to execute arbitrary commands on the underlying operating system of affected devices. I was looking through zero-day, these guys who track zero-day attacks. In 2025 last year, I believe this was the most we've ever seen, 107 documented known in the wild zero-day attacks in the year 2025. We're starting off 2026 pretty hot. 22, you got some thoughts on Cisco, Fortinet back in the news with these 0 days, or is just more of the same shit every day?
Bruh, like, I have no thoughts. I ranted
You're gonna pass
myself.
on this one.
I ranted myself dry on this shit all of last year. I can't keep doing this to the fine folk listening to this.
Yeah, but what are you
So-
telling customers? What are you telling your customers around these edge devices and managing it? Do you guys have like top level guidance for people who are just like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
I mean, monitor the absolute fuck out of these things and assume that they're probably
Have
the
logs.
Well, it's not just that. It's like assume that they are the beginning of just about any compromise at this point. So, like it's essentially, we could try to treat it as a honeypot, considering that you might as well assume that this thing is the source of whatever problems you're going to have in the very near future. So, in a way, it's nice to know where to start a lot of investigations, but it's just that's about
Fair
it.
enough.
Let's see,
I
the
wanna-
irony of buying a device, that is supposed to keep you secure, and then for that device to be the reason why you get compromised.
Right. And then it
Exactly.
goes end of life and just doesn't get patched and they sit around forever and we have
Not only
people
that,
constantly. Yeah.
Not only that, but like maybe you forget to pay the bill, and then your ability to get firmware patches is
Patches, yeah.
vanishing.
Even
Like,
patches are you suggesting that patches are sold or part of support contracts and you don't get free patches?
absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
for Fortinet, if you don't have 40 care, you don't get patches. It's very simple.
And you pay for 40 care.
40 care.
That's the name of it.
40 care.
Stop. That's the real name, Costin? 40 care, or did you make that up? You guys are terrible.
I didn't make it out. No,
For real?
let's Google it. Google it. 40 care.
Apple Care, 40 care.
40 care.
Well, there's 40 everything. There's 40 OS, 40 this, 40 that. So I guess.
Yeah, but I don't
40
think
care is
anybody
not
would
that
ever
crazy.
accuse them of caring. I think that's a hilarious thing. Like the
Well,
cynicism on that is
tomorrow
fascinating.
that will be 40 care AI.
Oh.
40 AI.
40 care AI.
Mm-hmm.
This week we got a new Citizen Lab report on discovery of Celebrite in Jordan, used by Jordanian authorities to extract data from the phones of activists and civil society members without their consent. Celebrite, for the most part in our industry, gets a pass because it's a law enforcement tool and you need to be tethered and there's no zero day. And I've complained about this on this podcast in the past because I've seen them sponsoring our conferences and showing up with their big boots and so on. And I have always struggled to figure out what's the difference between Celebrite and NSO. Why is NSO a pariah and Celebrite is celebrated? In this case, Costin, you got a chance to read the Citizen Lab report. And why are we writing about Celebrite if it's a legit law enforcement tool that we need to block
What
terrorists?
do you mean? Why are we writing? We aren't writing. Citizen Lab is writing, right?
Yeah, why are they making this into a
Yeah.
thing?
Honestly, I can't comment on what is legal and what's not legal, what's moral, what's not moral, again, without commenting on any of those. But I think it's important to understand the context. And they do actually say here that, let me quote, we analyzed the devices belonging to Jordanian activists and human rights defenders, okay? And then it says the cases analyzed in this report occurred between late 2023, mid 2025 in the context of protests in support of Palestinians in Gaza. So just for the context of the whole thing, apparently, these law enforcement operations, they were trying to break into devices of people who were protesting in support of Palestinians in Gaza. Now, what's interesting in the report that it has a number of IOCs and traces, which are the ones that are interesting for me. Again, you know me, I love the IOCs. maybe a bit tricky how to actually search them. So one of the things here is which kind of an open question, like without having access to one of these devices, it's more of a question: how do you actually determine if your own device has any of these signs, right? So some let's say kind of improvements to things like MVT, or also I think to date there is not a good open source tool which has the ability to analyze sysdiags with IOCs. So yeah, there's the European CSIRT framework for sysdiag processing and parsing, but still that is not as easy to use and configure as MVT. MVT is kind of the golden standard when it comes to ease of use frameworks to check if your device has been compromised. So, I mean, there's still a few open questions on the technical side of things. How do you check that? How do you check if your devices have been subjected to inspection with these tools? But
The IOCs include iOS crash logs that give you a process name and a service name that includes Celebrite.brute force. So, I mean, there are some artifacts.
That's pretty obvious, right? And I
Right.
think that one of the points they were making here is that they actually asked Celebrite if there's any chance that Celebrite could leave some kind of a marker on the device
Whitelist.
not to whitelist, but to say that, yeah, we poked this device. It was like done with Celebrite.
Watermark.
So
Leave a little watermark, right?
correct. And if you do remember, perhaps we were in Rome at a conference like many years ago, you and me,
Is
Ryan,
that
and
when
a
the
few
guy
other
was
people.
making electricity from cockroaches?
Absolutely, like the spy cockroaches.
Amazing, amazing. The best conference I've ever been to in my life. The one you can never talk about.
What
But
did you
yeah.
guys go to?
Well, a very funny conference, and at that conference, they were like the room was split in two sides. The people on the left side, they all had name tags like Joe, Mike, Jane, Mary.
Ryan. I had a
And
name tag.
the guys on the other half of the room, they had like a full names. So it was like super funny. And if you remember what I presented about back then, I was talking about the need to leave some kind of a digital marker in what we used to call digital cyber weapons, like in advanced sophisticated malware that it's used for destructive purposes, the same way a bomb has a
Like stamps
manufacturer
on the
tag.
side of a bomb.
Put a
right?
stamp, yeah, put there like who manufactured the bomb, the serial number, who used it, things like that, so that it can be traced for attribution purposes. I mean, if you do something, you need to take responsibility for it. So this is one of the things that Citizen Lab was asking here, if Celebrite could actually mark these devices in some way. And I don't think they got a positive answer.
It's like
out
when
of
you
it.
go through TSA here in the United States and they have reason to open your bag and check for something. They leave a piece of
They
paper
leave a
saying, hey,
tag, right?
TSA was here, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Correct.
that's not too hard. It's not a big ask. Is that a big ask if it's a legit law enforcement thing and they're just kind of like poking around to see if there's like shit in your bag?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily an unusual ask, but yeah, your mileage may vary.
I think this is a discussion we've had in the past that is important when it comes to the difference between like using these things for law enforcement versus using these things for intelligence. And like for folks who've listened to the podcast, I've already made that argument. But I think this is precisely what we're discussing is when it comes to law enforcement, we're supposed to be describing something that involves an evidentiary standard, right? If you are understanding how these tools work, there's a certain amount of like modification of the device, modification of the thing that you are collecting. And if your claim is subsequently going to be that you can imprison somebody or that you can provide evidence against someone on the basis of this device, which you have taken the liberty of modifying, I think there is a much higher standard that you're supposed to hold yourself to, and a certain level of transparency and a certain level of verifiability that should be a factor here. And we've actually made, I think it's kind of a strategic mistake, but I think it's one built on conflating the use cases between intelligence and law enforcement, that we also treat those as if It's like covertness is the most important thing. And frankly, if this is a law enforcement tool rather than an intelligence collection tool, then I don't know that covertness should be a factor. If anything, everything else that produces evidentiary stuff usually gives you the equivalent of like a bill of sale or some kind of receipt with hashes and things that says, look, this is all we touched, this is what we modified, this is what it was the first time, this is what it was when we were done, this is the only things we read. Like there should be, and maybe like the people using the Celebrite product get that as a trace, but clearly the person on the receiving end of this thing is also in need of that same mechanism.
Just had a question and a thought on this. It includes Android as well, Costin. They mentioned they included IOX for Android as well. Costin, I remember having you on a podcast a long time ago. I think it was your exit interview, the Great Exit Interview podcast episode. And you actually looked at the camera and made like a plea to people hey, don't go work for these companies. The work you do is not good for society. You remember that conversation we had around NSO and so on? Do you view Celebrite any differently?
Personally, I do. I mean,
tell me why.
Well, the use of Celebrite products requires like physical access. So it's the same thing, like, for that physical access, it requires a degree of interaction which is quite different from hitting someone the other side of the world through a zero-click chain with kind of no responsibility and no attribution, right? When somebody arrests you and they take your device, you know who it was. It was the law enforcement of whoever, right? As opposed to you get infected, your phone gets hit with a 0-day, it was Paragon Graphite. Maybe I don't know. In some cases, maybe you don't even know who it was, which malware it was, and you have absolutely no idea who is actually using that on you. So it's
the remote infection vector
shady.
Is a differentiator for you, complete differentiator.
For me, it's different. And what I was saying there is don't go and work for companies which they will be abused, especially because of this separation. The separation between the victim and the attacker, where it's like multiple degrees and walls between them, which make it impossible to trace it and understand who it was. Like there's no way to understand who it was. I think that puts them in a different category, and that they will be abused a lot more than the ones with physical access, simply because of this missing attribution part, where you can't really say who hit you actually.
When Celebrite is caught using 0-day, that doesn't bother you either.
Well, we know that they don't necessarily have all the 0 days to the latest and the greatest devices. So like in some cases, even in the report, they talk about this phone, which was vulnerable to checkmate, which is a like really old exploit that works all the way up to iPhone 10. So it's not necessarily like the cutting edge, but like also keep in mind, there's a bunch of other companies, not just Celebrite, which have these capabilities like remember in the past the famous case of the San Bernardino shooter. It was solved by Mark Dowd, right? Azimuth Security. So in my mind, there's like a huge difference between this local access 0-day exploitation for the purpose of just accessing the device, not infecting the device, right? When you infect the device, I think you also jump into a different realm. So there's like a difference between just accessing a device and then planting something on the device, and then just hitting the device remotely is an entirely different thing.
Does lockdown mode provide any sort of mechanism to protect folks from this thing? And let's just look at protesters. Let's assume activists, members of civil society, protesters around, and police are taking away their phones and plugging this thing in.
But in the sense that even like some of the cases which are being discussed here, face unlock was used to unlock the device, right? So you kind of force
Might have been
that
forced
person
and
to unlock
coerced,
it
right?
for
Yeah.
you, correct? Keep in mind that in some places, like around the world, if you refuse to unlock your device, then you will
It's
be
illegal.
arrested
Yeah.
for terrorist charges. So like that's a reality. If you refuse to unlock it, we're no longer talking about using Celebrite or whatever tools.
Right,
So
right.
that's why people will willingly maybe unlock the device because they don't want to be arrested for terrorism charges. But if they refuse, I mean, sure, yeah, Celebrite is an option. Then lockdown mode, I think it will make a big difference because it automatically disables these USB-based devices, like untrusted and unknown USB devices, while in lockdown mode. So that provides a good additional level of protection. I would say that if this is an issue, the best level of protection is to never carry any kind of compromising information on your phone at a protest. And even better, if you go to a protest, don't bring your phone.
How do you take video? Because that's part
With
of
a
the
camera.
protesting, right? Look, listen.
Just use a cheap Canon camera, Sony camera, something like
how-
that.
You're not
how
telling me it's a
des-
burner phone, bro? Like that?
How
Yeah.
desperate were we 2 weeks ago for anything out of Iran around the protesting? Those folks have to carry phones that are connected so they can upload it somewhere. I mean, like that for protesters, leave a phone at home is not a reality check. I mean, documenting what you're seeing is part of the protest, right?
Well, don't bring, like I said, don't have anything compromising on your phone, or don't bring your main phone. You can bring, like you said, a burner, if that's a word here.
I mean, I think that's a much more valid, like a protest is bringing a burner to a protest is a much more valid recommendation than like take a burner to DEF CON, right? Like a lot
True.
of fucking people are security
more useful,
posturing with
yeah.
that kind of bullshit about DEF CON of all places. And then they'll like go on a protest and be like, here's everything about me, my family, and everybody I know. Look, there's a lot of discussions to be had about like technology not being developed appropriately for these use cases. And like I miss it. Like I would love. I haven't kept up with the development of graphene. Like I know that Costin, you're a big fan. For OSs that are meant to provide, or even applications that are meant to provide security for those sorts of use cases, we really are being very naive in the feature sets, right? Like something that I appreciated about the philosophy described by the TrueCrypt developers back in the day, whomever they were, was always about like, this is how you should use this tool and what it will secure you against. And a part of it is you should have completely deniable containers. You should have things where you can, use, give one password and in reality it should be the other one, and that should make you have different effects, right? Discussions that we had around the Belarusian cyber partisans and like Telegram variants, where if you did certain things, it would show one thing, and if you did other ones, it would show another. Those are actually tools that are developed for the sake of protecting people in these really difficult situations that are actually life and death, that are actually about enabling that activity to go on. The technologies that we're talking about here, whether it's like full disk, encryption and like securing these devices and Face ID and like how do I, remove my passcode? It's nice that they're there, but they're not really designed for those situations. They're not properly designed for those use cases. I should be able to give you a different passcode that just gives you a sanitized version of my phone, and you're none the wiser. You just have no fucking clue, right? Yeah, it in a perfect world, and I know that I'm glossing over a lot of implementation complexities, but wouldn't it be fucking nice if I could give you a passcode for my iPhone and it gives you kind of like the clean guest version of it that I can hand to a child who can't see my nudes. They won't be able to see specific applications. They can't go through, certain messages or whatever. The apps just don't show up. They're all sandbox, right? Like these things just don't show up. Because then I can not arouse suspicion. And this is what we were discussing last time, is like this notion of OPSEC as being the shadiest motherfucker on earth is a great way to get your ass beat. It's a great way to signal yourself as somebody worthy of more investigation, as opposed to being able to walk through the border and go, oh yeah, here, officer, would you like me to unlock that for you? Boom, like, oh, here you go. Oh, yeah, what a wonderful family you have and what a clean life you have. And it's like, yeah, thank you so much. I'll see you next year, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. That's the ideal state of walking past security, is not arousing suspicion. And we're not developing shit for that as far as I can tell.
Speaking of suspicion and encrypted data, Forbes has a report out today. Thomas Brewster at Forbes has a report out today that Microsoft has been giving FBI the keys to unlock BitLocker encrypted data. In certain circumstances, when you set up BitLocker, you can choose, I think it's like in certain configurations, you can choose to have the keys stored on Microsoft servers. In those cases, the compel argument about what the government can compel you to do is that they can come to Microsoft, and Microsoft has confirmed to Forbes that it does provide BitLocker recovery keys if it receives a valid legal order. While key offers convenience, it carries this risk of unwanted access. Costin, do we know how many people store at Microsoft versus self-store of these keys? And what do you make of this reporting? Is this a surprise to you?
Well, your first question, you said how many people? I would say a lot, because
what percentage do you think stores the keys on Microsoft servers?
Like
10, 15?
If I remember correctly, like you said, we don't fact check, so I would be happy to be a fact check here. But if I remember correctly, whenever you log in into Entra or whatever with your device, so you use this Azure AD, your BitLocker key automatically gets backed up onto Microsoft servers. And I think that the moment that you log in your computer, you log in Windows. So you log into Windows with this remote Windows Microsoft account, your BitLocker key automatically gets stored on their servers, which is why I and many other people who are probably becoming a minority, we want to use Windows without a cloud account. We just want to use Windows with a local account, which is becoming an almost impossible task nowadays, right?
To be fair to the Microsoft folks, and not that I ever really choose to do so, if I have, unless I absolutely have to.
Be fair, we won't fact check.
No. To be fair, this is exactly the same thing that happens when you set up File Vault on Mac OS and do full disk encryption. If you allow it to, it has a specific setting that says, do you want to allow your iCloud account to unlock your full disk? And like, why do they do this? Because a lot of people are going to turn this shit on who are not security nerds, who are never going to write down their backup thingy, and then they forget a password, which happens to a lot of folks, and all of a sudden everything's gone. And you can imagine the amount of like customer support escalation, complaints, and bitching that comes with, hey, you gave us a well-scoped, well-defined feature, but we're users and we're often dumb about this shit, so we just, we didn't read the fine print. But what I would ask is simply, to what extent is this a choice on Microsoft's part? To what extent can they be compelled if they have the access to do so? Versus them just not putting up a fight, or being, worse yet, really proactive in providing it, right? Because there's levels to this shit. You're Microsoft, right? You're a mega behemoth with a bajillion lawyers who seem very excited to find ways to say no. Did you not fight it because you can't fight it? Did you not fight it because this wasn't the right situation in which to fight it? Or was there no intention to fight? You actually were dying for them to ask you, and you just had that shit ready, like, to go, right? Which one is it?
Apparently there was a case in Guam, and Microsoft said the company receives about 20 requests for BitLocker keys every year. So it's a tiny, tiny, tiny number. I mean, when the government compels you and law enforcement compels you to hand over this stuff, I think that's, I don't know. What's the advice to Windows users?
Here. I think that people losing their BitLocker encryption key, it happens a lot more often than probably law enforcement asks for your key. So I think from the usability point of view, it's good that Microsoft has an option to back this up. And I've seen, by the way, I've seen so many cases when people changed like a one thing in the BIOS, and that was like the end. They were asked again for the BitLocker encryption key because the BIOS checksum changed. They didn't have it saved. They tried changing that setting back in the BIOS, but it was too late. It didn't matter anymore. And that can be something as simple as changing the default boot device in the BIOS. It requests for your BitLocker encryption key. If you don't have that saved, goodbye, good luck, thank you very much. So from the usability point of view, it's a nice feature that Microsoft actually backs it up, and I know many people who are actually saved by this. But at the same time, yeah, it's a risk. That's why people still use TrueCrypt, and VeraCrypt actually, the new version of TrueCrypt, which is pretty nice and stable. You can even use combinations like BitLocker on one level and then VeraCrypt on another level, to either for a container or for another partition or another disk in your system.
Can we go back to the book recommendations corner for a second? Since we've been talking about TrueCrypt, and this is obviously a tangent, but like there's an amazing book called The Mastermind: Drugs, Empire, Murder, Betrayal by a journalist called Evan Ratliff. And it's about Paul LaRue, who's a really interesting figure in like these like criminal ecosystems, and very much cyber involved, right? When spam, drugs, like all this shit. But without really giving away the story, part of the implications here are that he was one of, if not the main developer for TrueCrypt, and that TrueCrypt stops being maintained when he becomes an informant or he gets captured or whatever the fuck it is. Phenomenal book. It's available in audiobook. It's available whatever. You won't regret it. It's a really fun read. But just anytime TrueCrypt comes up, this book just comes right back to me. It's such a great one. So The Mastermind, if folks are got a little time on their hands.
I don't know if you guys are getting to see this. I shared it in our live group chat, but Kim Zetter has some reporting on some ESET discovery of this. You remember last week we talked about this electric grid attack in Poland with some of the renewable stuff. Let me read the opening paragraph from Kim Zetter. Cyber attack that targeted power plants and other energy producers in Poland at the end of December used malware known as a wiper that was intended to erase computers and cause a power outage and other disruption to services. ESET has a tweet thread that describes it as Dino Wiper, used in an attempted disruptive cyber attack on the Polish energy sector on December 29, 2025. How does this change our view of what Ruben was talking about last week? We spoke about Ruben's research and what's actually going on there, Juanito.
It doesn't change my view. I'll admit that I'm like a little, like, I'm happy for them. I'm proud of it. I'm a little salty because the minute this one came out, Hagel and I were like, okay, man, let's go 3 for 3, right? Because we found acid rain, we found acid pour. We're like, this has got to be something like that. And it wasn't, we didn't find it. The sample, as far as I could tell while we're here, is not on VT. But great work by our ESET friends, as
man.
always,
I picked them,
man.
Yeah, I picked them in my year-end thing as the guys who always come out with these discoveries. Does this change your view, Costin, of what happened in Poland and the whole, the what happened in Spain, the Ukrainian issue, Russia and the war? Like, this changes the dynamics?
I don't think it really changes the dynamic. I admit that this just came out, so I didn't have time to look at the IOX yet, so I can't speak from my knowledgeable standpoint. But I don't think it changes much. Like I was saying, there's a certain inherent risk whenever you're combining together these renewable power sources, which are variable and dependable on things like the weather. Like if there's sun outside, if there's wind outside, and the fact that it's extremely important to have very precise synchronization for this, or otherwise you risk burning or bringing down the whole electricity network. And if that's feasible and if that can be done, then sure. I didn't have time to look at the Dino Wipers, so I'm gonna do that next after the
Okay, so
podcast.
let me ask.
If you
Let
can
me
get
put.
the sample, man,
Wait
like
a second. Wait a second. What do you do now?
Let's check.
Something like this drops. Like, explain to the audience what when you go into go mode to like, okay, let me go check for this. What are you doing? What is your first thing? Why is it important?
Well, first of all, right. What are we talking about here? Like, there's in the blog there is a hash. The hash is not on VirusTotal. So first thing I do, I check if it's in my collection somehow. Maybe I got lucky and I have it from another source. If it's neither in my collection, nor on VirusTotal, not on Silas Malshare, or on Malware Bazaar, or pretty much any other samples source out there, then I'll put it for monitoring using my project is now on VT, and hopefully I'll get the notification sometime.
So the scramble now is to find a sample.
The scramble is to find. Like, another possibility here is that, of course, researchers can reach out to CISA and kindly ask if they can share the samples. Typically, they cannot. Like, in some cases, it's not possible.
In most cases, you don't get it out of a lab, right?
Depending on how it was received. If this was received from a customer, then maybe the customer doesn't allow you to share it. What we were doing back in the days was we would try to find an equivalent sample on VirusTotal and include that hash on the blog, or share a YARA rule that allows people to find similar samples. Or
when you say equivalent sample, meaning what?
Say malware, but another version.
It's already there. Okay, got it.
Or like in other cases, we would try to get permission to share one of these samples, and we would upload it to VirusTotal in advance for the publication of the blog. Or in some cases, and this was, by the way, one of the reasons why CARO, Computer Antivirus Researchers Organization, was created in the first place, to allow for sample sharing in a secure manner between security companies. So typically a sample would be shared through CARO in advance of a publication whenever there's something like this happening. So, like, depending on a case by case, we would try to share the sample. That's what we used to do in the past. But of course, if you got it from a customer and customer said, do not share the sample, or maybe you got it from the national cert of a country and they say, do not share it with anyone else, then yeah, you can't share it. It's pretty simple.
And okay, so you don't. So you go hunting for samples. You don't find the samples. What else? That's it. I mean, that's where it ends. If you don't find the sample.
You can also hunt it by the detection name. So if there's a unique specific detection name from that antivirus engine,
there's
in the
only
blog,
one sample with that detection name, and it's from 2018. So I don't think it's that one. But there's some other things you can pivot on from there. I've found at least 2 samples I need to review since we've been talking about this.
Okay. No, I was just trying to get the audience into what goes into your head, what happens in a lab when something like this drops, because this is a pretty significant find.
It's a simple way, like, will you guys reach? Asking Juan, will you guys reach out to ESET and kindly ask for a sample?
Yeah, of course.
That's standard operating procedure, right? You reach out to your friends, and that's why, like, this industry is, everyone knows each other. You know who's working on these things, or you have a connection into one of these organizations. So in most cases, you don't get, though, because you spend so much time complaining about the lack of samples. I get the sense that it's like a fool's goal to go ask for it. You're usually going to get like, I can't share, but here's some other morsels or tidbits.
I mean, what I'm surprised we're not really going at here is just that Costin made a point about this being a NATO country that this is being done against, right? Like, when this happened in Ukraine, it was a big red line type situation, and part of the commentary was simply, well, yeah, but Ukraine's not a NATO member, right? It would be totally fucking different if they did this to a NATO country. You go, well, in this case, they did it to a NATO country. Now I'm assuming that now the reason we hedge our bets is to say, oh, but they weren't successful. And I think there's a big difference between, you tried and didn't succeed, and you didn't try at all, right? Like, I don't think we need to wait for them to be successful with something like this, assuming that it's anything comparable to the other situations that we've investigated, right? Whether it's Black Energy or Indestroyer or Acid Rain or Acid Pour, in those situations, particularly in Destroyer, more than any other situation, you had something that was hardwired to produce that result. So there's no room for ambiguity. There's no, oh, this was a generic backdoor, but you put it in a place that included control over the power. So maybe you didn't mean to, but then you kind of took advantage of it. In a case like Indestroyer and Indestroyer 2, you created a component whose sole purpose was to create this effect, right? So whether you succeed or not, there's not a lot of room for you to say, well, that's not what we meant to happen. So we're obviously missing the ambiguities of what this is. It's very likely that, if it's just a wiper, the same approach that we've seen with Acid Rain, Acid Pour was just try to brick and disable everything and delete everything associated with these systems. And there wasn't really like a whole lot of nuance or specificity to what you were doing. You just wanted to ruin whatever systems you got on. And the whole point is you got on to the systems that controlled the internet or controlled these satellite devices and whatnot. If it's anything like that, it's hard to make the same argument, but for fuck's sake, right? Like if this is what the polls are claiming that it is, it sounds like we just crossed another really big red line. So are we just going to be super casual about like Poland becoming the new like punching bag and the second frontier? Because the other thing I'll say is like, I've heard enough commentary out here of people concerned that the Poles were going to take the war to Russia themselves, and they were trying to keep the Poles from Polish people from deciding that was the right thing to do. But if the Russians are going to start egging them, shit's going to get real interesting real quick.
We all believe the attribution on this, right? I mean, it's been attributed officially. It's been attributed in the past to Russia. In this case, according to Kim's reporting, ESET's Robert Lipovsky says his team concurs with that attribution. And although they're still assessing the code, they attribute it with medium confidence to Sandworm. Sandworm, if you guys remember, is the hacking team Unit 29155 of GRU, Russian military intelligence responsible for the black energy attacks that struck Ukraine a decade ago. This is pretty nerve-wracking. What else can we say about this? I mean, it's now breaking. We have no new information. I'm reading from Kim Zetter's story here. Shout out to Kim. For getting the jump on this.
I'm happy. This is literally dropping while we're recording this, so like you can see,
right?
You could already see me on BT for the past. If you go back in this recording, it's been like 40 minutes of me just hunting for samples. But like, we don't have enough to look. We don't have enough to say anything ourselves. But as we were saying already, ESET is a pretty trustworthy partner, and they usually come like whatever they put forth, you can usually put your money on. So. If they're corroborating the claim, then I'll operate as if until proven otherwise.
Costin, there was something that you had mentioned briefly last week that we didn't get to, which was Germany forcing Toyota to disable remote engine preheating on combustion Lexus vehicles by over-the-air updates. There's this firmware updates. They wanted they wanted to remove the ability to enable heating in cars remotely through firmware updates. Very weird, related, tangential story here. What do you make of this?
I mean, obviously, the worrying thing here is that the possibility to do this over the air, so through remote updates, this is, I think, the worrying thing. And the fact that it's obviously not just Toyota and Lexus, but this ability to send firmware updates to cars, I think that's going to cause big problems in the future. We're going to probably watch a story at some point where a car's got some kind of an update over the air, and that resulted into a crash. It resulted in people's deaths. It resulted in all sorts of bad things. And from that moment on, it can't be long until we hear of how one of these amazing units who do pagers or whatever, they remotely hacked someone's car and drove it off a cliff.
How else is a car supposed to get updates, though? Plug it into a
Says-
wall
very
over
says
easy,
the
USB.
like
Tesla. You can
like
hear
my
the Tesla
car.
owner. Out of all
When
of us,
you
you can hear
drive
the
it
Tesla
into
owner.
the service, you drive the car into the service physically, and that's when it gets an update. If it gets an update every evening, every night in your garage, then I think everything is off the table. So I
This is
think
the
that's
default on
a
all
big.
electric cars. The default
he
is
means-
you have an app and you get a software update available and you click. Otherwise, you don't get fresh. You don't get
that's
fresh
fine.
features on your car.
It's okay if you click, but if this happens without you clicking anything in the background, invisible to you, then I think it's a
If
different
you
story.
don't click, you
Ryan,
can't drive your car. What
Ryan,
happens
I'm
in a
gonna-
world? Wait, let me finish. What happens in a world where if you don't click, you can't drive your car? Do you know full self-driving on Tesla is now only available by subscription?
Oh no. You
all
know
new cars bought.
who could have ever seen that shit coming? That's crazy. You know what used to happen, Ryan? There were cars that just like didn't
Had
need to get
engines?
any new features. Like they were fine. Like they just
Terrible
cars. The cars the features you bought it
Terrible
with were
cars
the
with
features
no value.
it was going to have. At the same time, no fucking bullshit German bureaucrat got to decide whether it was appropriate for you to use those features on any given day.
Hey,
So
this is our future. This is like the reality is that over the year updating, it becomes it is the revenue model that drives ARR in that world. Like
everything is subscription based. Look, until the time comes when we replace our cars with like just citywide fleets and nobody owns a car themselves, I have a 12-year-old car. It's going to keep, aging and ideally appreciating, and it'll just stay that way.
But is it German? That's a question.
Of course it's German. Otherwise, why would I ever want a 12-year-old car?
Please raise your hand if you drive a German car.
Oh.
Come on, Ryan. Come on.
Oh, no.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Ryan.
Hold on, let me
Ryan.
think. Let me think.
Oh, come on.
No.
No.
It-
America first, my friend.
Mercedes, man. Mercedes.
America first. Here,
Important to say that this happened not because Toyota wanted this to happen, but this happened because Germany government, whatever bureaucratic entities wanted for this to happen, so they doesn't pollute the environment by you running the car idle, so it heats up, so your ass doesn't freeze in the winter.
I mean, is that not a valid use for the features of the fucking car? Like, I'm sorry.
Remember, just like as a parallel, I remember I went to Black Hat Europe like many years ago. It was in the Mövenpick Hotel in Amsterdam, and it was me and my wife. She joined me for the conference, and we got into the room. And one of the things we noticed that it was impossible in the room to make it warmer than 23 degrees. So like you try to like make it warmer, it was stuck to 23, and there was some kind of message saying that for environment protection reasons, you cannot make your room warmer than 23.
For the listeners, that's 73.4 degrees Fahrenheit.
Well, thank you.
for the rest of us.
For the
What's
rest of
that in Kelvin?
1 second,
sound like
please. It's 296.15 Kelvin. Now
Wrap
you
up
know.
the show with some shout outs. I know everyone's itching to go chase Dino Wiper. Juanito,
not
wait a
much
second.
to chase, bro.
Wait a
There's not
second.
much to chase.
Isn't there District Con this weekend?
In theory,
I was going to say in theory because there's a massive snowstorm about to blanket Washington D.C. Do you think it's gonna affect the conference? Right?
I mean,
most
dude,
definitely.
last year, District Con had no electricity for the whole thing, and they managed to make it work. This year, Snowpocalypse is apparently coming. It's supposed to be Sunday, right? So, I don't know. I think everybody's trying to be as like upbeat about the prognosis, and like Martin actually just flew in last night. He's here for his DistrictCon talk. There's a lot of people who've flown in for this shit, so it's not like we're excited.
And the
for folks to
conference is
get-
going ahead. I saw they announced it is going ahead as planned, regardless of the snowmageddon that's coming.
Not
right?
just forging ahead, but like they're planning like snow day activities. So clearly,
I see.
they're
leaning
doing their
into it.
best. They're to lean into it. But yeah, I don't think we can foresee. Look, if it's just a lot of snow, it's uncomfortable, but you move forward. If it's the kind of snow where it's like, power's going out, people can't like move from one place to another, flights get canceled, then that's going to be a very different discussion. But you know,
How
fingers
does
crossed
DC do
for
with street
DistrictCon.
cleaning?
It's not as good as Chicago, but it's not as bad as London.
Okay, that's a fair middle ground. Speaking of conferences, VB announced today that they're heading to Seville in Spain this year. VB 2026 will take place October 14 to 16 in the perfectly located Barceló Sevilla Renacimiento on the banks of the Guadalquivir.
Wow.
The Guadalquivir River. This is somewhere between Malaga and Gibraltar, right? Somewhere in the south of Spain. Where is Seville?
Further up from the south.
Okay.
I guess.
So that would be north.
I've been there like more than a decade ago. And I think I was only there for a half a day for lunch. That's the only thing I remember.
Yeah.
A great lunch.
VB always takes you to some pretty cool
corrida
European
place.
locations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to the folks at VB, Helen, and all those guys putting that together. Any other closing shout outs? Any thoughts, Juanito? Close the show.
Well, first of all, happy belated birthday to our own Ryan Naraine, who doesn't want to fucking hear it, doesn't want anybody to remind him that he, despite all visual evidence, apparently is getting older. So happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Come on. And yeah,
shout out and shout out and appreciation for all the people. Like my wife set up this video messages. Everyone sending in video happy birthday messages. It turned into be 15 minutes of people wishing happy birthday messages. A lot of the people who listen to this show as well. So thank you guys. I saw
wish
it all.
Recorded the results. Did
and
you cry?
You made me happy cry. You all made me happy cry. Like wah wah.
Good man. Good. It's good
Thank
to
you
have an occasional cry is not going to kill any of us. Don't cry as often as I do. I do it for sport at this point, but like a little bit won't hurt. DistrictCon is this weekend. What's cool is they will be streaming the talks, you know, knock on wood, assuming things work. Then Reverse, as I've mentioned, is in March. I think there's still some tickets available. I got mine. I'm excited for that. The lineup of talks
That's in
looks
Orlando,
great.
Florida, right?
That is Orlando, Florida. So you can go visit Mickey Mouse or go build a lightsaber and then go learn about reverse engineering. And then Echo Party Miami, as I said last time, I will be keynoting. I'm actually pretty excited about the talk. And unlike my usual last-minute fly-by-night efforts, I'm trying to write a paper to go alongside it, so I'm already working on it, and I think it'll be timely. So do sign up for Echo Party, and more importantly, the CFP's open. So bring your A game, guys. Like Miami doesn't have Miami doesn't have a good conference anymore.
The vibe coming to Miami, right?
Dude, like we lost immunity. You know, what was it? Infiltrate,
yeah.
And so Miami doesn't have any good conferences.
You're not in Miami anymore.
Yeah, but come on, like Infiltrate was a good conference, man. So like it's a good time to kind of get some more diversity going up here, and it's a known commodity and known quantity. They've done great. Echo Party Argentina is fucking awesome. So I was
talking about the fact
that
you're not in Miami anymore, my friend. You keep saying we and here. It's like you're living in Washington, D.C.
I keep making the mistake of speaking for a community I'm not sure exists. So I will be correcting that. Yeah, I will be correcting that in my thinking in the very near future.
Costin, got any shout outs, any plugs?
I saw, but yeah, by the way, I was thinking like make Miami America again. I was thinking there's a ramp up discussions about Cuba. Venezuela, Greenland, now Cuba again. And I just wanted to say shout outs to my friends Jose and Jorge from Cuba.
Oh, damn.
I hope they're doing well.
Is that the same guy? You see how you're doxing the guys?
In a long
He's doxing the guys that opened up the country's internet for him.
Thank you again for that. And I hope you guys are well and hope to see you soon.
Stay safe to all our friends in Cuba.
From SAS, man. Yeah.
All right, that's our show for this week. Episode 82 in the books. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the Snowmageddon, Juanito.
Thanks, man.
Costin, enjoy the Taekwondo training and go hunting.
Thank you.
Happy hunting, everyone.
Happy hunting.